Can you imagine a 7-time world champion completely losing his cool over the radio, right after fighting with his own teammate? Because that was exactly what happened with Lewis Hamilton at the Chinese Grand Prix. And the question is inevitable. What was so serious that Hamilton exploded against Ferrari in the middle of the race? What we heard on the radio in Shanghai was not a simple complaint. It was a message full of frustration that revealed something much deeper within the Italian team. An angry Hamilton, pointing out that the internal fight with Charles Leclerc had put vital points at risk at a time where Ferrari still does not have the dominant car to afford that luxury. In other words, while the team seemed to allow an open battle between its drivers, Hamilton saw a key opportunity slip away against rivals who today seem to have a real advantage in pace. But this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because hours after that explosive radio, Hamilton appeared before the press with a completely different speech, calm, diplomatic, and grateful to Ferrari. A brutal contrast that has left the entire paddock wondering the same thing. Did Hamilton really say what he thought on the radio, or was he sending a direct message to the team? What happened in China was not just a radio conversation. It was a clear sign of tension, of ambition, and of a driver who knows that if Ferrari wants to fight for the championship, it cannot allow internal errors or unnecessary battles between its own drivers. Because when a champion like Hamilton raises his voice, it usually means that something much bigger is happening behind the pit wall, and what is starting to be revealed inside Ferrari could completely change the course of this season. The Chinese Grand Prix left many stories on the track, but one of the most talked about did not occur during a spectacular overtake or due to an unexpected strategy. It happened on a pilot's radio, and not from anyone. It was the radio of Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion who does not usually lose his cool easily. However, in Shanghai something happened that led him to express very clear frustration towards the Ferrari wall, leaving one of the most tense communications of the weekend. It all started in the Grand Prix sprint. Ferrari was trying to maximize points at a delicate moment in the championship, where each position can make important differences against direct rivals. But in the middle of that scenario, a situation appeared that changed the tone of the race for Hamilton, an intense wheel-to-wheel duel with his own teammate, Charles Leclerc. The fight was aggressive, tense, and highly commented on by the commentators during the broadcast, because it was not a fight against another team, but between the two Ferraris. In modern Formula One, these situations are always delicate. Teams usually allow their drivers some freedom to compete, but when the car is not yet the most competitive on the grid, the risk of losing points due to an internal battle can be too high. And that was precisely the point that seemed to ignite Hamilton's frustration. After the duel with Leclerc, the Briton launched a very direct radio to the team, making it clear that the way in which that fight had been managed could have jeopardized the team's result. The message captured by the international broadcast showed a clearly upset Hamilton, questioning the risk taken in an internal fight that, from his point of view, did not make much sense at that moment in the race. It wasn't just a matter of sporting pride. It was a strategic question. Ferrari was not dominating the weekend and every point was valuable, especially against rivals who seemed to have a superior pace in certain aspects of the circuit. And there appears another key element to understand the context of this reaction: the performance of the car. Although Ferrari had shown positive signs in some areas of the circuit, especially in curves, the car continued to have difficulties on straights and in managing hybrid energy. That meant that even when the car had good pace in certain sectors, it could lose ground to other teams when power and energy efficiency came into play. From Hamilton's perspective, that completely changes the way he approaches a race. When you have the faster car, you can allow yourself more internal risks because you know you can recover positions. But when performance is not yet dominant, each unnecessary battle can cost too much. And in a sprint race where opportunities to make up ground are limited, that risk is multiplied even more. That's why Hamilton's radio wasn't just a momentary complaint. It was a reaction that reflected the mentality of a driver used to fighting for championships, someone who knows that titles are often decided by small details. For him, allowing such an aggressive infighting at that time could mean losing points to teams that, at least in certain conditions, seem to have a slight advantage in race pace. However, what really turned this episode into a much bigger story was what happened next. Because when Hamilton appeared before the media after the race, his tone completely changed. The same pilot who had shown frustration on the radio now spoke calmly, praising the team's work and offering a much colder and more calculated analysis of the situation. That contrast between the excitement of the radio and the diplomacy of the press conference began to generate a question that quickly spread throughout the paddock. The true dimension of what happened in Shanghai began to take shape when the race ended and the time for official statements arrived. Because while Hamilton's radio had shown a driver visibly upset with the management of the internal struggle, what appeared before the microphones was a completely different Lewis Hamilton, calm, analytical, and much more diplomatic in his words. And that contrast was precisely what ignited the debate within the paddock and among fans. In the press conference after the sprint, Hamilton did not talk about frustration or internal errors. Instead, he highlighted the team's work and used a very striking expression when describing Ferrari's collective effort during the weekend. He called it great work. It was a statement that, apparently, sought to convey tranquility and unity within the team, removing any sense of internal conflict. However, for those who had listened to the radio minutes before, it was evident that there was something more behind that change in tone. Hamilton himself then focused the analysis on the car's performance. He explained that the Ferrari has very competitive aspects, especially in cornering behavior, where the car can maintain a good minimum speed and offer confidence to the driver. But he also openly acknowledged that the car still has clear weaknesses in other areas, especially on the straights and in hybrid power management, two fundamental factors at a circuit like Shanghai. As the hours passed, what happened in Shanghai began to be interpreted in a very different way within the world of Formula One. What initially seemed like a simple hot radio from a frustrated driver transformed into something much more revealing about the moment that Ferrari is experiencing and about the role that Lewis Hamilton wants to assume within the team. Because when a champion with 7 world titles decides to raise his voice on the radio, it is usually not just an emotion of the moment. It is usually a warning about something that, from his experience, could cost dearly later. The situation that occurred in the sprint revealed a delicate point within Ferrari: the management of the rivalry between Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. On paper, having 2 extremely competitive drivers is a huge advantage. It means that the team has 2 weapons capable of fighting for podiums, victories, and even championships. But it also implies an obvious risk if this rivalry is not controlled correctly. In the history of Formula One, there are many examples of teams that ended up losing titles by allowing internal battles that ended up costing decisive points. In this context, Hamilton's reaction begins to make much more sense. The Briton was not only defending his position on the track, he was defending a way of competing that he has learned over years fighting for championships. At that level, every strategic decision, every overtake, and every point can make the difference between winning or losing a title. And if the car is not yet the fastest on the grid, that precision becomes even more important. In fact, Hamilton's own post-race analysis makes clear the undercurrent of his frustration. Ferrari has a competitive car in certain aspects, especially when cornering, but it still has significant disadvantages on the straight and in hybrid energy management. This means that in certain conditions rivals can have a clear advantage in race pace. In such a scenario, any internal error can amplify these differences and allow competitors to capitalize on the situation. That's why many analysts began to see Hamilton's radio as more than an emotional reaction. For some, it was a kind of internal message addressed to the team. A way of pointing out that Ferrari needs to refine its decision-making if it really wants to compete with structures that have been working for years with almost perfect precision in these types of situations. Teams like Mercedes or Red Bull have shown in the past that the management of their drivers can be as decisive as the performance of the car. There's also another element that makes this episode especially interesting. Hamilton is not a driver who comes to Ferrari to simply adapt to what already exists. He arrives with the ambition to win, but also with the experience of having been part of one of the most dominant projects in the recent history of Formula One. 4 years at Mercedes, the Briton was part of a system where every detail was aimed at maximizing results and minimizing unnecessary risks. And now he seems willing to transfer that mentality to the Italian team. That means episodes like the one in China could be just the beginning of a deeper transformation within Ferrari. Hamilton's arrival not only adds speed and talent to the team, it also introduces a new way of understanding the competition, a culture where each point is protected as if it were decisive for the championship. And in a season that promises to be extremely competitive, that mentality could make a huge difference throughout the year. Because in the end, what happened in Shanghai goes far beyond an aggressive radio during a sprint race. It was a small window into the internal dynamics of Ferrari, the pressure that exists within the team, and the level of demand that Hamilton is willing to impose since his arrival. What started as a simple radio during the Chinese Grand Prix sprint ended up becoming one of the most revealing moments of the weekend. Because Lewis Hamilton's reaction was not just a release of frustration in the midst of the adrenaline of the race. It was a reflection of something much deeper, the mentality of a champion who knows exactly what it takes to win titles, and who understands that championships are also lost due to small internal errors. The fight with Charles Leclerc made it clear that Ferrari has 2 extremely competitive drivers, two talents capable of fighting for victories when the car allows it. But it also revealed the great challenge facing the team, managing this rivalry without compromising collective results. In a season where every point can make the difference against rivals with very competitive cars, Ferrari cannot afford to lose opportunities due to poorly managed internal battles. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.